It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes that join us from any and all corners of the nerd universe by taking your questions. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture, and our guest this week is, I guess, in my opinion, he's a legend when it comes to cartoon animation. So many other wonderful things this man has done. Please welcome Joe Mariam. Joe, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Thanks for having me.
And we thank you for being with us. Now, if you have any questions for Joe during any portion of this program, let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comments. Our producers are going to be monitoring it as we go throughout the course of the show. But to kick things off here, Joe, going back a little bit, what would you say were some of your favorite films or TV series growing up?
Well, it's funny. I always say that I was raised and I never bothered to grow up. But, it's funny. At my age, I started off where TV had no content at all. It had family shows and Westerns, and it went on. And of course, there were things, in the 60s and all. I would have to send it back to the 80s. And I'm kind of a TV junkie. If I think right off, somebody said a series you'd like to see continue after it stopped, probably Wise Guy with Ken Wall. That was one. I loved all of Bochco's stuff, the Hill Street Blues and the NYPD Blue. And basically, like I said, I watch most everything except horror flicks.
But I feel not a big scary movie fan, as it were.
No, I never could quite understand the appeal of it, and it freaks me out the fact that almost 70% of the content advertised as coming attractions, if you look at it, is horror movies. It's you never realize it till you look at it. I mean, there's constantly one going, and I always came to the point of who watches this, I mean, but obviously it's a much bigger thing than you would believe.
Interesting point. So I take it watching the more tame, even though it was made back in the 30s, the Universal monster movies is too much to ask.
No, I did see some of them, but they didn't impress me. Godzilla, tearing down the Empire State Building. It's like I have real problems. I guess I'm not the ideal, target audience, I always say. But I have real problems with, aliens taking over the world and blowing up the White House. And at the end, the hero saving it and rebuilding in the background. I don't know. It just doesn't get it for me. I mean,
That's okay. Yeah, whatever makes you happy. And I always tell this to people: not everything is for everyone.
It's very true. I for years I was always adamant about trying to make my point. No, man, I don't like this. And I came to the point many years ago of just saying, not a fan. It's easier. You're not, everybody has what they do. I mean, really, look at what we're doing here. Everyone has something they do. That's an interesting point that most people don't realize. Everybody has something in particular that they do. They may not do it all the time, but it's really the basis. I mean, my goal in life when I was a kid is I wanted to be a radio personality. I wanted to be a broadcaster, and I came very close to it. It's like, the road not taken. A brush. What does he say in Field of Dreams? It's like a wind that brushes right past you, and went in different directions. But everybody has something they do, whether they do it or not. It's kind of what I'm going at.
Absolutely fair. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine the other night, and we were discussing some of the things that she likes, like some of her favorite fictional characters. And she says, well, I like Marvel, but there's only very few things I like about DC. Like, for instance, I'm just throwing this out there as an example. Yeah. She said, I don't like Superman. I don't care for Wonder Woman. And those are characters that I'm a fan of. But then I said to her, listen, she's like, I'm sorry if I disappoint you. And I'm like, I mean, the Superman, lover over here, that kind of hurts that you don't like Superloop. But at the same time, I can't hate on you because you can like Marvel and DC or other properties at the same time, and you don't have to like, 100% of what they offer. It depends on who you are and depends on, what your specific taste is. But that's the conversation I had with her the other night. And also you were pointing out, by the way, I'm glad you brought up Field of Dreams because I believe you're referring to the scene where Kinsella is having a conversation with Moonlight, Graham, and Frank.
Yeah.
Not Moonlight Graham says, it's like watching your dreams and watching them brush past you like a stranger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love that movie. Goodness gracious.
I have a very, very bad habit of movies I like. I might have watched 50 or 60 times. I mean, I can wake up in the middle of the night and hear in the background the credits come on to something like Casablanca or Chinatown and just get up and sit and watch the whole damn thing. I know the words to it, but for some reason, a great performance like that just sticks.
Nice. No worries about that. Fun fact, Casablanca turns 80 this year.
Really now?
Yes, we're going to be doing a celebration for it towards the end of the year in November.
I claim in the top 5 that it definitely, if it's not the best ever made, it's up there somewhere.
Oh,
you know, I just have a thing about it, let alone the characters in it. I'm a voracious reader, and a couple of years ago, I gave up on the easiest thing to write about is murder. Everybody writes about murder, and if you ask a journalist, he'll tell you it's the easiest thing to write about. I got so fed up after reading 600 of them, you know, that I decided I would only read rock and roll biographies. Ooh, so I went through that for years, and recently came to a point where I just was burned out on everything. And my point relating to the Casablanca thing is I got it yesterday from Amazon, a Raymond Chandler novel. I had never read any of it. I've seen the movies, but I've never read any of his books. Yeah. And like you say about Casablanca, that whole era, you know, it's especially with Chandler because he does 1940s Los Angeles. And if you ever want to read about something truly bizarre, read the history of 1940 Los Angeles. It was the most corrupt place on the planet. It takes Chicago to task. It's amazing. The whole thing with the police department and the movie industry and the gangsters. I mean, Bugsy Siegel, I was raised in a little suburb of Los Angeles called Beverly Hills. Oh, boy. And up the street from me, my mother's best friend, you know, had a swimming pool. Yes. So in the summer, we'd all go up, all the kids and all. And her brother would be there with his friends, and they all wore heavy suits in the middle of the summer. I couldn't figure it out because they all had guns underneath. Her brother was Bugsy Siegel. So it intrigued me from that point on to read everything about 1940s LA, and it's a world you can't believe. It just goes to. I mean, if you get into Hollywood Confidential or LA Confidential,
I believe it was LA Confidential.
Yeah,
yes, and I have seen that film. I have seen it.
It opens up a world that if you read about the events, and they keep bringing up events of that particular movie that are based on true stuff that has nothing to do. If you read farther into it, you get into the history of LA. And that whole, I mean, if you see Chandler's Farewell, My Lovely, or I don't know if he wrote Devil in a Blue Dress that Denzel was in, but it's that whole 1940s LA thing. It's amazing. Yeah, it's a whole other world.
I mean, I'm fascinated by certain parts of history. Don't get me wrong. And yeah, the whole 1940s stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to look a little bit deeper into that. I'm actually going to be speaking with someone who is a Hollywood historian who likes to cover the golden age of Hollywood from the 1910s all the way up to 1960. She's going to be on this very program in a few weeks. She has a PhD. She is she runs a travel blog called Hometowns to Hollywood, and she wrote a book of the same name, Volume 1, which you can find on Amazon. Her name is Dr. Annette Bohenick. She is also a professor at Purdue University. So. Look forward to talking with her in just a few weeks. There you go. There's a little teaser for you out there. And by the way, we're talking with the incredible Joe Mariam. Make sure you're sharing this video with all 200 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching this video. I guarantee it. So with that being said, gee willikers. With that being said, were there any comic books that you remember reading growing up? Any of those over there?
You know, I used to there was a drugstore on the corner, Mr. Bierman's drugstore, and we'd sit in the back and read comic books till he'd throw us out.
Oh, boy.
And it's funny, you read Superman, of course, and Batman, of course. And it's funny because in latter years, and on the animation project that I have here today, I got the pleasure of working, even though I only met him socially a couple of times, with Stan Lee. And my closest friend was one of his confidants and did the whole cartoon with him, and that we used in our animation cells. And I realized that I had read Spider-Man for years, but only in comic strips in the newspaper, and it would be 5 frames and say more to come and never ever finish. Or I'd never get back to the next day. It never was continuity. It was always a different clip. So When
Huh.
asked about comic books, I always start to say Spider-Man, but I think about it, I couldn't tell you a scene or a relation, anything out of it, because I only read it in brief segments. We read Archie comic books.
Yeah.
Archie was always around.
Mhm.
God, who else? Casper the Friendly Ghost was a comic book.
That's true.
And then you see, from comic books, we went right into cartoons. And there was, of course, suddenly late 50s, early 60s, Saturday morning cartoons. My association with it comes from my oldest, I say, lifelong friend. Andy Heyward is his name.
Mhm.
He's an executive director. Probably he's the only living executive director anymore. Chuck Jones is gone. Lou Scheimer is gone. Hanna-Barbera, Disney. Andy Heyward started in the 80s and has done, at least 85 to 100 cartoons and cartoon
Jeez.
movies. Which is what got me into cel animation altogether.
Mm.
And his father worked with J. Ward Productions
Mhm.
on what later became Rocky and Bullwinkle. But when I was a kid, it was called Crusader Rabbit. And there was Crusader Rabbit and Rags the Tiger are Rocky and Bullwinkle, the identical voices. When you look at the characters, if you ever look this up, they're the same characters in different form. J. Ward Production was the way out on the left-hand side, liberal, very, very quirky kind of comedy thing that he put into cartoons. He ended every episode with some saying like, tune in next week for our episode, I Can Row a Boat Canoe. And he always waited at the end to see what it was. And they did follow in each other, and then they created characters and spin-offs. And Andy's father was a writer for one of the shows and did his own show and had done cartoons and then worked for Hanna-Barbera later. But that's how I came into it, because as kids, we always said, I met Andy when we were 11 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah, and somehow we've managed to stay, without killing each other, we managed to stay friends for over, this many years. And we got into this project. I came back down. I lived in Northern California. I came back down to Southern California to basically take care of my mother when she was 84 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
that beautiful woman lived till she was 95.
Woo! It's
and
a
I
good
have
run. It's a good run.
Not only that, but she died of an avalanche of natural causes, something
Oh.
everybody in the world would love to have happen. Just at
Mm.
95, the body gives up. So I came to take care of her, and
Sure.
Andy said to me, why don't you sell my cels? I said, you still got your cels from the 80s shows? He goes, yeah. Where are they? Well, they're in a warehouse in Burbank somewhere. You don't know where? No, I haven't seen them since the 80s. And I suddenly started selling on eBay, which suddenly had come into prominence. I started selling cartoon animation cels, and these were the original 6x9 cels. There were 8 fields, and he had all these shows. He had Sonic the Hedgehog, he had M.A.S.K, he had everything.
Ooh, M.A.S.K. Yeah.
One of my best sellers, and you know something? I watched it for the first time the other night on Shout Factory, which is a cable TV channel.
Yes.
Do you know Richard Foose from Shout Factory?
Well, I don't know the gentleman, but I do know Shout Factory because I bought some of their DVDs that they revamped or they remastered certain films or TV series that they were able to get the rights to. For example, I'll give you an example. I bought The Wizard from Shout Factory, the 1989 film starring Fred Savage and Beau Bridges, and they did a remaster, and they did behind the scenes features, and they did a reunion with some of the cast and crew members, and that was great stuff. I also got the Mighty Morphin. I'm actually wearing a shirt for that property. Speaking of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Shout Factory put out the Mighty Morphin series as well as the other seasons respectively on DVD, and that's how I was able to collect, my childhood shows.
Well, they actually did a whole bunch of things. There was one of Andy's series of the very little-known series, but as a cel was a cult following, called Captain N, the Game Master, which is out of the Nintendo series. And Shout Factory bought that from him and did DVDs of it. And I occasionally will get into binging on about 12 episodes, but M.A.S.K was just a cel, and one of my main customers in the beginning, and believe me, I was a duck and deer in the headlights. I was selling classic stuff for cheap. I didn't even know what it was. And I learned more, and the customers, such like Philip Miller, who got me to you, the customers.
And by the way, thank you, Philip Miller, for bringing all these wonderful people onto our show.
By all means. the customers taught me more about the cels, and that suddenly this one girl had this amazing collection.
Sure.
Said to me, "Can you ever get M.A.S.K cels?" I had to think M.A.S.K, which is Mobile Armored Strike Command.
Yep.
And I go and I find,
Yeah.
I finally find a box of them. I mean, there's 10,000 crates in a warehouse, and I'm just pulling at random.
That's a
you
lot.
don't know what you don't. Yeah, there's over 100,000. These are almost 1 million cels, probably. And what's really simple that most people don't know, in early cartoons, they hand painted animation cels on cellulite. They had a special camera that filmed them, and there would be 4 to 20,000 cels in every half-hour episode. I mean, they weren't always. Sometimes they were composites put together. Sometimes they were the classic key cell setups, and on others, they weren't. So there lies the whole thing she says about M.A.S.K. So I find some M.A.S.K cels and I put them up. And I usually start my cels at $80 or $90. Put them up for $100. Next day I look at it, it's at $700. What it is these cels had been in that warehouse for 25 years. No one had seen them anywhere. So when they first, and I was taking out the best setups once and just putting them, I didn't even know. Then I met another lady who I have to give a lot of credit to. Her name was Diane Pfeiffer. And she was a cel junkie. So I said, well, come on, I got some cels. And we went to a place in Burbank, California called Film Bond. And if you go into Film Bond, right, it's just amazing. You're walking over Rocky III and Gone with the Wind. Every original copy is there. And it's got all these climate controls and fire controls. It's freezing inside and nobody is allowed inside. And for some reason, I have a habit. I made friends with the guy there, a little guy named Andy Petro. He was like this little munchkin type guy who ran the place. He was like the wizard, who ran the cave. And he says, you can come anytime you want. So I take this girl with me and she just freaks out. And we spend days sitting on concrete floors, just pulling, I'll take, you have any Barbie over there? Give me the Teddy Ruxpin cels. And I want the Mario cels. We had Mario Brothers. We had Sonic the Hedgehog. Andy did 80 cartoons. It was just a plethora. There was an amazing amount there. So we kept doing those. And then he sold the company.
Wow.
And the cels went away. So I, did a whole bunch of things. And I kept telling him I want to recreate cels. Well, unfortunately, as of maybe 2000, they went digital. And no one did hand-painted cels anymore. It was all done by computer. So he and I just keep kicking this idea around. And then one day he goes to a Hanna-Barbera. He was a Hanna-Barbera writer originally. Goes to a Hanna-Barbera reunion lunch. And he runs into his old friend, Iraj Piran. Now, Iraj is one of the most wonderful men in the world, probably one of the most talented men I've ever met. He was the art director at Hanna-Barbera for 34 years.
Jeez.
I mean, he did the Jetsons, he did the Smurfs, he did, everything you ever found.
George Jetson? Yep. Sorry, I got the theme song stuck in I got certain theme songs rotating in my head right now, so.
It's funny, Charles Barkley was talking about that theme song the other night on Inside the NBA.
Oh, really?
Don't know what started him. It's anything with Charles. He started on this tangent about, I want to go to the prom with Judy Jetson. And they all start playing the songs. And of course, Inside has all the great graphics. So they start bringing up all these things. And it was that song. It was that theme song.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Real quick, I want to Cereal Box Network has chimed in here. This is Johnny from Back of the Cereal Box. He says, Johnny here, I don't so much relate to the DC heroes as you guys were discussing earlier. He also goes on to say that Casablanca is, in fact, the best movie ever made, according to Johnny. Yeah. So there you go. That's what he has to say. And Philip Miller's here with us. He says, hello, Ryan and Joe. Wow, thank you for doing this amazing interview. Well, Philip, we got to give credit where credit's due, my friend. If it weren't for you, some of these legends wouldn't be present in this studio. So our hats are off to you, good sir, Philip Miller. And also he says, haha, me too, Ryan, in regards to having theme songs stuck in his head. Yeah. There you go. Sorry, I just wanted to bring that up here as a few people are chiming in. And thank you so much for those of you who have been chiming in and sharing this video with all 300 of your closest friends, because they're going to like the way they look after watching this video. I guarantee it. Now, you were bringing up all these animation styles and things you've done. Now, I want to bring up some examples here. If you're listening to this episode, I'll describe the images for you. This image is of Inspector Gadget. Am I right?
That's the truth. And you see Andy assigned the bottom of it. We did those. And we did those in lots of 100 limited editions, numbered and signed, and they had here. Let me get this also. I don't know. Can you see this if I bring this up?
Yeah, sure. I can bring
That's
it up on
a-
the big screen. Here
yeah.
you go.
You have a certificate of authenticity.
Whoa.
Okay, so what we did very simply, Ryan, Raj suddenly told us we could do these, and he suddenly did these just out of creation, out of pictures, gave us hand painted cells
Wow.
and everything. Like I couldn't believe all of a sudden. And then one day I was doing a trade show. The LA Comic Con used to be called Kamikaze. Stan Lee had it down at the convention center.
I remember that.
So I'm in the Kamikaze and I'm sitting there with my hand painted cells and all, doing a modest business, but I kept saying I'm in the wrong place. You want to sell hand painted animation cells, you need a real aficionado, somebody who collects them. You don't want a kid who walks through a show. You might find one, but it's rare. And Araj is sitting there. He's never been to a trade show. This man created every cartoon we ever saw, but he'd never been to a trade show like this or a Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes to me about a week later and he says, we should do these in lithographs.
Right.
I said, why? He says, didn't you notice that a kid would buy a lithograph for $25 and he'd go over to the table and have an artist sign it for $35 and they put a decal on it, he says, and then he goes home $80 later. We created all of our hand-painted cells in lithographs with signed by Stan, signed by Andy Heyward, signed by Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, and they had the authentic seal packaged with a chipboard and in the back a COA saying you have number 1 over 80 or whatever, and we put it out for $39.
Jeez. Now,
So-
correct me if I'm wrong. Is this an example of one here? This one?
Exactly. That's one right there. That's a show. We had the basic, that was our main property in the first run, the Cosmic Crusaders. Andy and Stan wrote that show together. And you can see there's the 7 Cosmic Crusaders. It's a show about Stan driving in the desert one night, and suddenly a ship lands, and these 7 people get out of it. And he decides he'll make them superheroes and teach them, and he takes them to his beach house and he trains them, and suddenly they become crime fighters. So,
wow.
unfortunately, there are marvelous characters in it. It was a decent storyline. It just never got promoted correctly, and it's since been scrubbed. But that's, as you know, the way these things go.
Yeah.
But you can see our seal there down at the bottom, and you can see the numbering on it, and the COA that I showed you would be in the back. So you'd get all that for $39. And then we created our website, which is AndyHeywardAnimationArt.com, all word, Andy Heyward Animation Art. And currently we're going through a whole bunch of changes with it, but I'll get to that in a minute. Right now, you know, what I'm saying is that's exactly what we did, but he just came up with this idea. And next thing I know, here we have them. LA Comic Con now has a virtual store where I have a virtual store in under Andy Heyward Animation Art. And I mean, pictures, books, music, unbelievable stuff if you contact LA Comic Con. And I believe that's lacomiccon.com. I'm not sure on that. But you can purchase stuff like this all year round. You see, what happened to us is it's a very simple process. I wanted to do this. We kicked it around for years. We finally got the website made. A man named Michael Perlmutter of the Yes Crew network did very good job on that. And suddenly Iraj gave me all these examples and he inked all the cells, and now we have to get them painted. So we sent them overseas to China. And the truth was, you had to have what my main painter calls boots on the ground, somebody teaching them. They couldn't do it. Their concept of what would be okay just wasn't even close to somebody like her who'd worked for Hanna-Barbera as an art director for 34 years. So they said, you can't do it. And I said, nobody tells me I can't do it. So I decided, I'm going to find people who painted these things. And I can't tell you, I went to art colleges, I went to bookstores all over. All of a sudden, one guy says, you ever talk to Beth Ann Gee? I said, who's Beth Ann Gee? Well, she used to be a cell painter for Hanna-Barbera, maybe Disney, a whole bunch of people. She lives out in the valley. And here's the number, and I wound up calling 3 people to get to her. And here comes this great girl. And she and her daughter and her friends became my painters. And they would paint, Raj would ink the cells and they would paint the cells. And still to this day, she has a company called Queen Bee Ink. And she still does painting and restoration. She makes most of her time on restoration. But so we put that whole thing together, and then we put it in, and then suddenly the lithographs came, and we made the product, we printed it, we packaged it. When I say we, I'm talking about myself and my other personalities. And we got it all ready to go, and we were going to have a product launch on March 18th, 2020.
Oh.
And as you know, March 15th, the world ground to a halt.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So we kept talking about it and promoting it and doing more work while I worked on the zombie squad from 6 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon, selling a product I'm not even going to tell you about, one of these mobile emergency button products. So very grinding work. And finally, when it came time to get it placed in again, maybe 6-8 months ago, we hit a corporate buzzsaw. Andy owns, or he's CEO, because it's a public corporation now, of Genius Brands International, which has their own series of cartoons, which is very interesting. He has a concept called Content with a Purpose, and he only makes cartoons that teach kids things. He has Warren Buffett in a series that has Warren Buffett teaching kids how to invest money.
Oh my God.
What's really interesting is Andy did a thing for Warren Buffett. He has that big jamboree for his stockholders every year in Omaha.
Oh, yeah.
And he did a 10-minute or 5-minute cartoon presentation with Warren in it. Warren likes to see himself in cartoons. And here's something very interesting, and most people don't know, that Andy told me once. The man actually edits every script. He reads and puts comments on the side of them. The most important guy in the world. So he has a company that does that, and he's doing very well with it. Many cartoons, and so we actually, his board of directors suddenly said that they didn't want his name on it. Well, I said, his name is on there only because we're using his old shows. He really had no part in it outside of great impetus, a lot of support, financial as well, and he took nothing from it. But they said, you can't do this anymore. Suddenly there I am again with all this product and all this, websites and everything, and no place to show it. A beautiful product can be a beautiful product, but if it isn't seen, nobody buys it. So currently we have the website up at andyheywardanimationart.com, and we have all our characters, and we still have a bit of the product left. We sold through the canceled series, the Cosmic Crusaders, but we have the Gadget stuff and the Warren Buffett stuff.
I noticed you also have Captain Planet.
Yes. Are you a fan of Captain Planet?
I grew up on the reruns, man. That theme song is so catchy. I remember having the ring, the power ring of fire from, Wheeler's character was the power of fire, from North America, Wheeler with the power of fire. I had so much fun watching that growing up. The theme song was killer. The suit for Captain Planet looked cool. And the kids who have power rings that can do crazy, command the forces of nature. It's like, yeah, I would kind of like to have some of those powers because, may help some situations, may help with other stuff. It's gonna, it's fun. Yeah, I was a bit of a planet. I was a Planeteer as a little kid growing up watching reruns.
The kids who were, the people who were in it. Tom Cruise was in it.
Really?
The first year. Andy tells this great story about how Tom Cruise called him up because Ted Turner and Andy Heyward have become great friends over the years, and most everyone's a friend of Andy Heyward's is that business, but yeah, exactly. And they created this series. That was Ted Turner's series, his idea, and he still has a Captain Planet Foundation about the planet and the Earth and all. And supposedly the story goes somewhere where Cruise called him up the first year, and Andy said to him, "There's no way we're going to pay you the kind of money you get." And I believe he did it for nothing. I don't know. It was only about a year, but that's a little facts about his shows when he tells these things off the cuff are just amazing sometimes.
Great voice cast for the time. I mean, Captain Planet had, I believe it was Whoopi Goldberg as the voice of Gaia. You had LeVar Burton as Kwame from Africa. You had some other Star Trek alumni came through the doors and voiced certain enemies, antagonists. I think even I'm not sure if this is right or not, but wasn't Madonna the voice of one of the characters at one point on Captain Planet? I'm thinking to myself, goodness Lord, for an animated type show to get this some of these big names out there.
Well, it's
quite amazing.
There's a show he did called Liberty's Kids, and it was a great show that for kids to learn, the American history through cartoons. But the voices he used, where he used Walter Cronkite, he used Dustin Hoffman, and
5 minutes to Wapner. Yeah.
What's its Walter Cronkite became amazing friends with Andy Heyward through Liberty's Kids. He tells a story about how he heard, I forgot who he heard on it. Dan Rather, somebody was one of the voices, and he said, I want to be a voice on that. And years later, he and Andy became close friends. Andy bought his boat before he died. He has a boat, there's a 60-foot boat called the Gadget boat. It used to be called the Assignment when it was Walter Cronkite's. But they used voices in that one that you couldn't believe. It became a thing with actors to want to be a voice on that show. And I think that probably did better than the show did, if you want to know the truth on it. It's like, I saw a piece recently on Law and Order and how every major actor wants to say that they once appeared as a guest on one version of Law and Order. It was a 2-hour production. It was unbelievable when the names that came up. And that's become a real badge of honor type of thing, which I guess within industries, everything has.
It really, what am I trying to say? It really has, because I mean, even they've Law and Order has come back after getting canceled 10 years prior, and now it's back for its 21st season because it was canceled unceremoniously out of nowhere after its 20th. It was this close to breaking the record of being the longest running television drama, or whatever it is at the time. And now it's back and it's rebooted. It brought back 2 members of the cast from season 20, which in this case is Anthony Anderson and Sam Waterston. I mean, Sam Waterston, my gosh. Guy's been around for so long, he hardly ever ages, that dude, Jack McCoy. But that's just me. But as far as Law and Order goes,
I think the same thing when I happen to be a junkie for the show. I've watched every episode.
Oh, dude. Okay, so you and I know what's going down. So yeah,
I'm a big Law and Order fan. Recorded the first 4 episodes of the new one the other night. It was on USA Network or something. If you could suddenly, it was there. So
I have that.
And I actually, I happen to think the world of Jerry Orbach. I have to watch.
Oh my gosh,
I watch
Briscoe, come on,
over and over and over again. It was a classic character. It just
to think that guy was also the voice of Lumiere in one of the best animated films ever made, Beauty and the Beast. I'm like, geez, Jerry Orbach, you got mad skills, brother.
Well, it really is interesting, and this series brought it out. This production about Law and Order. Jerry Orbach was a Broadway performer. Singer, and so was the guy who played Ed.
Jesse L. Martin, who played his partner Ed Green.
They talk about how during the breaks during filming, the 2 of them would just break out in harmony. You just don't picture the 2 of them doing that, but that's where they came from. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It was on USA or something. It was about the 20 plus years of the SVU, and that show is still going and all.
Oh, that thing's still, I mean, they're still going. And then they got the new series known as Organized Crime that brought back Christopher Maloney's character of Elliot Stabler, because he took 10 years off to work on other projects. The actor did, not so much the character. But the actor did, and now he's back and he's doing his thing. And the Law and Orders are starting to cross over again, because now that Olivia is back, doing well. Olivia never really left, but
never left. Yeah.
But Chris Maloney are back, and now they're crossing over between SVU and
I watched every one of them,
like they did last night. Not last night, a few nights ago during this week's episodes. But yeah, my goodness gracious. Like, I was watching reruns of Law and Order a few nights ago, and I noticed that one of the cases involved an actress escaping a slavery ring, and the young actress played by a very young Laura Linney.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my gosh, Laura Linney's been through the door. Julia Roberts has been through the door. Sam Jackson's been through. I mean, what was it? The late, great Chadwick Boseman, a.k.a. Black Panther. He was on the show back in 2004 during Jerry Orbach's final season. I mean, my goodness gracious. The list just goes on and on and on of how many maybe not so well known at the time, but then they just became big fish right after Law and Order. It's crazy.
Well, that's what they said about it being on that, having it on your resume. But
good resume builder.
Do you know anything about Dick Wolf?
I know he's produced like a billion shows, such as Law and Order.
Dick Wolf started off writing
Miami Vice.
And Hill Street Blues before that.
Hill Street Blues before Miami Vice. Okay, yeah.
He has a litany that goes on and on to every show. I mean, Miami Vice. I recently, believe it or not, rewatched Miami Vice. I found it on Roku channel.
Oh, there you go.
With the exception of 6 or 7 episodes that I just didn't like, So there were just a couple of them there I just thought were terrible.
Things got a bit stale towards the end there. Yeah.
Well, towards the end, I like it even better. When Crockett suddenly had long hair, it was cool. I liked it better.
Yeah. But the thing I remember reading is not a lot of people were fond of how seasons 3 through 5 of Miami Vice went, because Dick Wolf was on there and he was making it. He was testing the waters of a formula for that would later become Law and Order, and people were like, that doesn't work. It kind of goes against the grain of what Miami Vice was in its early seasons when one of the creators left. So it's kind of like, eh. But listen, I watched the first 2 seasons on DVD, believe it or not, of Miami Vice. And yes, I still collect DVDs and Blu-rays. That's a fact. I'm okay with streaming services. Don't get me wrong, but I'm also a fan of physical media because I try to support that kind of stuff. So watch seasons 1 and 2, and I'm like, this is good. And then I just never got through to 3 to 5, unfortunately. But that's partially because I just kind of lost a little bit of interest. But then again, I can always go back. There's a million ways to watch any kind of show these days.
The truth. Have you ever noticed the amazing turnover in cast with Dick Wolf Productions?
It's pretty good. Well, with Law and Order, it's almost like a revolving door every 2 to 3 seasons.
There's a reason for it. Supposedly, the word says that Dick Wolf is impossible to work with, and he has a fuse that says you're through, and that's it that day.
Wow.
So that's part of why it switches like that. But
that's unfortunate.
What you say about DVD, I have to say I appreciate that from you. From the years 1990 till about 2000, sure. I had a company that started off with floppy disks to hard case, to CD to DVD to the cloud, putting us out of business. Yeah. So I have a closet that's got 1,500 CDs in it. I mean, in cases, in spring-loaded racks.
Goodness gracious. That's amazing.
I haven't even looked at one in the 5 years I've lived in this place. It's because of streaming services. I make playlists. It's like on Spotify. If you check out my name on Spotify, I have maybe 190 playlists on there.
Good Lord.
Don't ever.
That's a plethora, all right.
It is, yeah. You take somebody like me with a pandemic where I get locked down inside a place to live with a spool of 100 blank CDs and a download service. I can make a lot of playlists. So
you probably could.
That's the only thing I listen to anymore. But what you say about the fact about streaming services, they're not the most reliable.
Well, sometimes if I'm looking for a classic film and they don't have it, it's, well, where do I go? I go to Amazon. I buy it on Amazon. Like, for example, I was curious about learning more about certain, classic golden age Hollywood films. Double Indemnity. Never seen it. Went on Amazon, bought it without even thinking about it. I'm like, it's film noir. It's old school Hollywood. I want to watch this. I want to learn more because I'm a big fan of films such as Casablanca, Kiss Me Deadly. Yes. I watched that. That was cool. I remember watching, what was another film that stood out to me on Blu-ray? I mean, I saw it in my theater and they still do this. I just don't go to the theater as much anymore because of the whole, pandemic situation, even though some of us here on Earth are getting back to normal, which is great. Keep that positivity moving forward. But still, I remember watching this film on the big screen and I said to myself, I really like this. I want to watch it again. And it was Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. That was the first Hitchcock film I ever saw, was To Catch a Thief. Really? Cary Grant, Grace Kelly. Bless that woman's heart, Grace Kelly. She was gone way, 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 way too soon. But blew my mind. Then I went on Amazon, bought the 5-disc set of the essential Hitchcock collection, which included Psycho, The Birds, Vertigo, Rear Window.
North by Northwest?
Yes, North by Northwest was on that set too, and I watched all of them, and I thought, goodness gracious, these are some good films. Rear Window is my favorite Hitchcock film.
Really?
Big fan of Jimmy Stewart, and once again, Grace Kelly. That woman can do really no wrong as far as I'm concerned with her acting chops. I saw her in another Hitchcock film with Cary Grant. It was called Notorious.
Yes.
That was a really good Hitchcock film. That was dang good. And I thought, I got to watch more of these classic Hollywood movies because these are good. Like, these are better than most of the movies I see nowadays. Seriously, old school Hollywood, they knew, like, they had, there was a formula, there was a way, and they had a
flair to it. They had a certain panache. There was a flair.
It was a flair, and it was a formula, and it worked. It worked so well, at least in my opinion.
I get into classic movies all the time. I mean, it's just amazing. I can binge on them, like anything with Humphrey Bogart. I mean, anything with Humphrey Bogart. I used to tell people, I said, it's been 38 years since I smoked tobacco, and they say, do you ever want to? I say, only when I watch a Humphrey Bogart movie. He made it look so elegant with the case and the way he tapped it. Just part of his routine was just amazing to me.
Oh, one of my favorite Bogey films is The Maltese Falcon.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
The Maltese Falcon was a great movie. It's the characters he used in him. I was kidding the other day. I saw some guy on the street. I said, guy looks like Sidney Greenstreet. Of course, nobody around me knew what I was talking about.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. Do you have the statue? Do you have it here? And then you got to have Peter Lorre standing behind you, and he's like, you may have the Falcon, but we certainly have you. And it's just, Well,
it's so funny you say that. I have a friend, and her lifelong partner's name is Rick, and I talk to him all the time. He refers books to me, and I call him Mr. Rick. I always say, you really despise me, don't you?
Well, if I gave you any thought, I probably would. You despise me, don't you? Anywho, Philip Miller chimes in. He says that Rear Window was his favorite Hitchcock film, respectively. And he goes back to a conversation we had earlier about the animation and the cels. He says Captain Planet was way ahead of its time in terms of environmental awareness. Oh, did it? I was not aware that Whoopi Goldberg was in Captain Planet. Yes, she was. She was the voice of Gaia, the spirit of the earth. That's who she was, Whoopi Goldberg, the Whoopster, as we call her.
If you look at it, it has great color in it too. The cels, the way they were done, the Captain Planet stuff, the way they incorporated the greens and the reds and everything on his uniform, it really was a very, very interesting production.
I actually had the Captain Planet action figure.
Really?
I did. And not only that, I'll give you a little piece of a good story here, if you don't mind me sharing this with you. With Comics Captain Planet, I tune into certain Facebook Live sales that involve comic book people, comic book people who are selling comics and stuff. And I actually managed to get Captain Planet #1.
Really?
Of the comic based off the television series. And I have it. It's bagged, and I believe it's boarded, and I have it here in my collection. I mean, I don't have it, right here, right now to show to you, respectively. But I got it, and I thought, if I'm going to get anything from my childhood, if I can get like one issue from certain, adaptations of a show, I'm good. And I got Captain Planet #1.
It's interesting. I was just telling somebody last night, I think, about, they talked about if I had bought these programs from the first Super Bowl. I said, if they weren't bagged, it doesn't mean anything. They don't understand. It's not a certified collectible unless it has, like, the bagging, the COA, some kind of accreditation to it. People just think that if I bought a program at the Super Bowl, it'd be worth $500,000. And then I said, no, you don't understand. That's not the way it works.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a bit off. Once again, we're talking with the great legend known as Joe Mariam, who has worked with cartoon animation cels as well as many other projects. If you have any questions for him, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to share this video with all 500 of your closest friends, because they're going to like the way they look after watching this video. I guarantee it. Philip Miller asks, have you watched much of the Vincent Price films, such as The Comedy of Terror? I have not seen The Comedy of Terror, but I believe I've seen one Vincent Price film, maybe two.
I've never seen a bunch of them, but if you look in the latter years of Vincent Price, there'll be a man with him named Louis M. Hayward, which was Andy Heyward's father. He did a lot of stuff with him at the end of their lives.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is
truly an amazing man. I tell you, he was light years before his time. He had a series when I was a child, literally, when TV had just come about, and it was called Winky Dink. And what you did was you put the cellophane on the TV screen, which was probably an 8-inch screen at the time, and you would make it by the pen, you would make him cross the bridge. In my mind, he was creating the first interactive game and had no idea he was doing it. This is in the 50s. And it was a very short-lived thing. But when I was that age, you would come home and you would watch Sheriff John. And he had the beginning cartoons. There were the Disney cartoons with the that were just like the mouse figures, not Mickey Mouse, but like tons of them, the armies of them and all. It'd be a very bizarre thing. And there was Crusader Rabbit. And he was on all the time. And Crusader Rabbit with Rags the Tiger was then later Rocky and Bullwinkle in the segments where it would suddenly say, tune in next time for this show and stuff like that. And I have a great cel that was given to me as a gift. It's an original Baldwin cel, a Gerald Baldwin cel of Boris and Natasha and Fearless Leader.
Oh, my goodness.
I love that series.
Oh, I remember watching reruns, I believe, of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And then I saw the live action adaptation of it with, I believe it was Rene Russo playing the female.
Natasha.
Yeah. I forget who played the short guy. I forget who played him. Was it Stanley Tucci or was it one of the other actors? I can't remember who played.
I never, like I said, I have a cel from it because it was a first edition original. I never paid attention to that live version of it because I didn't think it was done very well.
That's fair. No, that's listen. I'm sure you're not the only individual who has that opinion, and that's fine too. I mean, at the time when I watched it, I thought it was cool, and then you go back and watch, it's kind of like, this is kind of cheesy, weird, and over the top. But you had Andy, I believe, not Andy, excuse me. You had Rene Russo, and I think maybe Danny DeVito was Boris. I can't remember. Whoever remembers that movie and who was the cast, let me know, because I know that the female lead in the movie was Piper Perabo.
Yeah, I was going to say.
She was the one who rescues Rocky and Bullwinkle and says, hey, your old enemies have come back and we need your help to stop them. And then they had a whole cast of other people. Piper Perabo started out as one of her first films was Coyote Ugly.
Coyote Ugly, yes.
Which I liked her in. And no, not for the reasons you think, people. Okay, let's not go down that road. She has acting chops. Okay, she's not just a beautiful face. She has talent. Okay, don't come at me in the comments. But listen, she was good in Coyote Ugly. She was okay in Rocky and Bullwinkle, but that wasn't her fault. It was the writing.
She had a series called. She was
Covert Affairs.
I thought it was great. Yeah, it was very.
Covert
very
Affairs
good.
is one of the most criminally underrated series in the history of television because you watch that on USA during their Blue Sky era. My goodness gracious, USA was cranking out great series after great series. And then all of a sudden they were like, well, we're going to change up the formula and throw in reality shows. I'm like, no. I don't want to see reality shows. I want to see more white collar. I want to see more things like Burn Notice, Suits, Covert Affairs. You give me more of that Flavor Flav, and I will be your best friend.
I've watched every episode of each show you just mentioned.
Well, that's fantastic because Burn Notice is great. And speaking of Burn Notice, the lead actor, Jeffrey Donovan, is now a detective on Law and Order.
Really now?
He's the partner to Anthony Anderson's character.
Yes, sir. What's funny because I'm not an Anthony Anderson fan, so I was really tepid about the whole thing. I thought he was the weakest character of the entire show before. Personal opinion. But Jeffrey Osborne, I was thinking about the other day because I considered starting to watch Burn Notice again.
Or Jeffrey Donovan, yeah.
Jeffrey Donovan, yeah. And because of him, and I thought, wonder what he's doing. I had no idea.
He's on Law and Order now.
Well, he was a guest star in Law and Order in its early years.
I haven't seen his episode yet.
Yeah, I've seen it all so many times. I've seen it several times. He was the overbearing father of a daughter who went off the rails, and he was really.
Oh, yeah. No, never mind. I'm sorry. I take it back. I have seen that episode. I think it was like later, like season 16 or 17. I have that episode on DVD. I have it.
And I noticed him because of Burn Notice. Is the only reason the other night I watched an SVU, and I spent the whole night trying to figure out who the hell was that main character. I know the voice, and being a voice person, I said, I know that voice. And I went, and at the end, I finally find out it's Jake Weber. Jake Weber played the husband on Medium.
That's with Patricia Arquette, yes.
He also starred, but he had a strong role in Meet Joe Black with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
But the same way, when I watched that, I didn't realize it was him except the voice. And he was much older. He had grayer hair, worn differently.
In this episode, he was grizzled. Like, you could tell that he's aged. I'm sorry, Jake. No offense. I know some people drink the immortality juice, but unfortunately, I don't think you're one of those lucky recipients.
You talking about the one the other night that was
the SVU with Jake Weber. Yeah, he is. Yeah. You can definitely tell that man has aged. And it's unfortunate, too, because he was so good. He was good in the episode, but he was also really good in Medium as well.
Oh, yeah. That's another show that I wound up working mornings and watching TV in the early afternoons when I came home, and Medium was on for 2 hours a day about 4 or 5 years ago. I watched the whole series, and which is really funny because I'd never seen the end of it, and I'd never seen the beginning. I had come in. There's another show I used to watch called Numbers.
Ooh, yeah. I've seen 5 of the 6 seasons of that show. I haven't finished it yet, but I hope to finish with season 6 soon.
I didn't realize it had that many seasons because I had missed one. Until I went back into it on reruns, I kept saying, where does this come up from? I had missed it. I'd come in on it. I just assumed that I'd come in and knew what it was, but I didn't. With a lot of shows, I've done that.
I actually have Numbers season 1 on DVD.
Really?
I do. It was only 13 episodes at the time, so it's only a 3-disc set, but it still works.
I found a thing called Filmworks and IMDb.
Sure.
If you can watch amazing old series on the thing.
Oh, yeah.
If you put up with the commercials, and they're oddly enough, their commercials are not offensive. It's a 3-minute block of commercials instead of that nonsense they keep playing on regular TV, and it just plays through, and it's like second nature. So you can see a lot of TV there.
That's a fair point. I appreciate you bringing that up. Once again, we're talking with the great storyteller, and at least in my opinion, Joe Mariam is here with us. If you have any questions for him as we go throughout the course of the show, let us know in the comments, let us know in the live chat. Don't forget to share this video with all 700 of your closest friends because they're going to like and just enjoy the way that they look after watching this video. I guarantee it. What would you say is a collectible item that you would like to have in your personal collection, but you don't have it yet?
A collectible item. I think there
could be anything. Could be an action figure. Could be a program or a poster or a comic. It could be anything.
With me, because I'm a cel collector, it would have to be a classic cel. Some of the maybe the limited, not so much the limited editions because they made them in mass, but something that was a one of a kind from not so much early, but maybe middle ground TV. like the time of the Andy's old company Deke did of the Inspector Gadgets, the M.A.S.K, more so than the early, Disney and all. Even though, because people always say with cels, do you have Disney? There's very little Disney out there that isn't owned by somebody who paid a fortune for it. I mean, there's just, there are warehouses somewhere throughout this country that have boxes of cels in them. Believe me, I've always thought about this. We used to, my friend Diane and I used to always talk about finding that warehouse and all. But I would have to say a collectible would have to be pretty much either that or something. I'm not a gun collector, but some old weaponry, maybe even like samurai swords or something like that. Something that was really just off the wall that when somebody walked into the room, they just stopped and looked at it. That would have to be my criterion.
No, it's completely fair. It's completely fair. It makes perfect sense. Do you think one of those, how do I word this? Like storage units or maybe warehouses will end up on an episode of Storage Wars?
Yeah. Something, I wouldn't doubt it. I can tell you times that I've wandered through swap meets and found people that suddenly had a box of animation cels and didn't even know what it was.
Really?
This is my dad's garage. Are those worth? And I just, what do you want for them? It's just amazing too. But it's also a market that got torn up at the end. The cel collectors, people jumped in it and started selling stuff for cheap prices, and it became just a mess. Which is why we tried to recreate it with the hand painted ones. We wanted to come out and recreate this, and it is a goal. It's something to be done later, but at the point right now, like I said, we're still up, but I'm looking for a new property. Is what I'm doing. If anybody out there who handles Sailor Moon, that's one I'd really like to find. But I plan to come back with the company under my original name, Life Inside the Cel. I create because I believe that there is a story inside every animation cel. So that's going to come back as that. I'll switch the website over and I will continue doing animation. But I don't know, it's collectibles. I drive a collectible car. I have a 1980 280ZX Datsun.
Jeez.
I mean, it's the 10-year anniversary. Mine is number 1037. They made 2,500 of them.
My gosh.
It's funny. I bought it 10 years ago with 60,000 miles, and I just turned 140,000 on it. I mean, the car, it's 42 years old, and it's got 140,000 original miles.
And it's still ticking.
Oh, it's perfect. It's not perfect. It needs cosmetic work. But as far as running, I've been driving it for 10 years now.
Whoa, this is heavy. There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
I watched that again recently.
I'll be honest with you. That's one of those films you can just pop on any place, day or week, or even part of the year, and you just watch it. You can just watch it all the way through because it's hilarious. It's hilarious. It's heartwarming. It's perfectly edited, as some people have pointed out, and also it's endlessly rewatchable, I think.
Well, let me give you one that anybody out there who's into this will really appreciate and doesn't know about. It's a movie called Into the Night with Jeff Goldblum.
Ooh.
And it has a cast in it of maybe 45 notable names. Good Lord. If you didn't read the credits, as it happens, you say, "Well, there's Dan Aykroyd. There's David Bowie," and it goes on. And I say this because I had the pleasure last 2 weeks ago, is Andy's birthday, having dinner and sitting across from John Landis, who was the director of and we discussed Animal House. And I mentioned to him that I said, you had a cameo role in Into the Night. And he busted up. He said, I didn't think anybody ever watched it. It is a movie called Into the Night with Jeff Goldblum. And you'll love it. It's
I love Jeff Goldblum. I mean, but who doesn't, though? Jeff Goldblum is an eccentric person. He's incredible.
Yeah, and he's very much so in this one, too. I mean, really. He has a gunman with a gun to his head. And he sits with a demure demeanor saying, why is my wife sleeping with somebody else? And the gunman just blows his brains. He can't believe it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in this case, life finds a way.
Little by little.
Gee willikers, I got to look this film up. By the way, when it comes to certain collectibles that people are looking for, Philip Miller says, I would love to have Scooby-Doo cels from 1969 if possible. Well, Philip, anything's possible. You never know.
Scooby-Doo cels are probably around. That's not a really hard one. I mean,
1969 specifically? Yeah. I'm not sure.
Well, you'd have to look. Actually, if you put it out there in a cel collector forum, there is somebody out there who's got that. I mean, it's,
you're always free to do that there, Philip.
Really.
Goodness gracious. Well, that's a good list there when it comes. Wow, fun facts about Jeff Goldblum and 45 other people. When I think of John Landis, one of the first things that comes to mind is Lucky Day, Dusty Bottoms, and Ned Niederlander of Three Amigos. You see, Hefe, roses can bloom in the desert. Yes, you have a plethora. Hefe, you do not understand what it means to have a plethora.
I think my favorite thing from him had to be Trading Places. I
haven't seen that yet.
Are you kidding me?
I've been on this earth for a lot of decades here, Joe, and I have not seen that film.
Well, I've never seen E.T.
Listen. I watched E.T. as a kid growing up, and I thought, it's fine. Nothing to...
It just never had it for me. I just... Same with...
didn't do it for me.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That film is so... That didn't do anything for me either.
Well, not only that, I went to high school with Richard Dreyfuss. So
you went to high school with... you're going to need a bigger boat. You went to high school with the guy from Jaws? Goodness gracious.
Well, yeah, I went to Beverly Hills High School. I mean,
Wow. You went to school with that guy? American Graffiti? Get out of here.
He was in my sister's class 2 years ahead of me. He graduated in 1965, I think. Yeah, actually, and he had this. He was Ricky Dreyfuss then. He wasn't Richard Dreyfuss.
Oh, he was Ricky. He was Ricky Dreyfuss. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he was the class clown. I mean, he made himself known. He was destined for it. But he hung out with Rob Reiner. Went to Beverly. I mean, they all hung out together. So it was a nepotism type of thing where they all became what they became.
Jeez, went to school with Richard. Did you ever? Do you have a favorite film of Richard Dreyfuss's filmography that stands out to you?
Yes, and I'm not even a fan of his, but he did this crazy film called Let It Ride. It is without a doubt one of the funniest things you'll ever watch. What's the two sisters? Meg and Meg Tilly. Meg Tilly is in it, and there's a whole bunch of people in it. It's a hysterical movie. It's just he's a loser at the racetrack, and it's all filmed at Hollywood Park in Southern California.
Let It Ride. Okay, if anyone else knows more about Let It Ride, let us know in the chat. Would love to hear your thoughts on this because I don't think I've heard of this film before, and I'm a Richard Dreyfuss fan to a point. I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of his filmography. I've only seen the ones that people keep egging you on to see, such as Close Encounters, Jaws. What's another one? I mean, a few other. What about Bob?
Down and Out in Beverly Hills.
Down and Out. Okay, that's another one I haven't seen.
Well, something. I actually watched that because Nick Nolte was in it, and he plays such a loser part that it gets disappointing. It really does. I'm a big Nick Nolte fan. I've read his biography.
Can I tell you something about Nick Nolte? I just saw this film a few weeks ago for the very first time, and I absolutely really enjoyed it. 48 Hours.
Oh, I know the words to it. I've seen it. There's 48 Hours, and then another. That's Eddie Murphy's first film.
First film he ever did was 48 Hours, and yes, they did do a sequel 8 years later called Another 48 Hours. And I watched both of them. I watched both, and I thought this second one, I give it like a 2, maybe a 3.
It was reaching.
It's reaching, and it doesn't really work all that well. And Eddie Murphy doesn't really have too much to do in the film as much as he did in the first one. So I'm thinking the second one I probably give like a 2 out of 3 out of 10. The first one, the first 48 Hours, the original film, I would give that like a solid 8. That is a darn good buddy cop film.
Also, Nick Nolte, I can go on forever. Nick Nolte in North Dallas 40, which was just the football story is just amazing. He plays with Mac Davis, believe it or not, is the other lead in it. And yeah, it's one of his. He was great at it too. He's like Chris Christopherson. Every time he's in film, the guy's great, and you think I never think of him as in film. He's a singer. But Nick Nolte. I read his biography too. It's I never realized he had such a large body of work. Mm-hmm. He does. He just is. It's amazing.
Blue Chips.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then unfortunately, there were two. By the way, there are 2 different iterations of this. He was the father in 2003's Ang Lee's Hulk film.
Really?
Yes, he was the father to Eric Bana's character who played Bruce Banner, the Hulk, in that film in 2003. Sorry, I hate to say this, but that 2003 Hulk film, I thought it was okay for the time, and then 5 years later, they rebooted it with The Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton in the title role and Liv Tyler playing Betty Ross, and then you had William Hurt as Thunderbolt Ross in that point, and I thought, way better film. Way better. The Incredible Hulk is way better than Hulk from 2003, but that's just my opinion.
Being a diehard Bill Bixby fan, I always think of the Hulk as the series they did on television.
Lou Ferrigno, yeah.
Yeah, with Lou Ferrigno.
Which we watched an episode of that in one of my film classes when I was in college. Fascinating stuff, that Bill Bixby show.
Well, there's fascinating stuff. Bill Bixby did a show called The Magician.
Never saw it.
It was a crime sort of thing, and he was always doing magic. And at the end, it always said, Mr. Bixby does all his own magic tricks. He was a magician by trade.
I was not aware of that.
I wasn't either.
He
till
plays
I watched
David
it.
Banner in the Hulk, and then he plays a magician. My goodness gracious, I didn't know Bill Bixby was a magician. Get out of town.
Well, it's funny the way he does it in the Hulk, where you see him at the end, all this demure music where he walks down the road.
Yeah, he's walking down the street.
This was a common theme in television.
Really?
David Jansen had a series called Run for Your Life, where he was a lawyer who suddenly was terminal disease, and he starts jumping out of airplanes and he tries to help people. Michael Parks had one called Then Came Bronson. It had no purpose, but at the end, there he goes at the end, just like The Fugitive. There was that Quinn Martin voice that came on and said, and he just suddenly walked away. So when I saw that with the David Banner thing at the end, when he's just traveling around, it was like watching something from 30 years ago.
Jeez. Man, goodness.
But then
gracious,
you have to be as
amazing.
demented a memory as mine to remember all this stuff.
No.
Because I have trouble remembering what I'm supposed to do tomorrow, but I can tell you about television from 30 years
No,
ago.
that's okay. And we appreciate all the stories you've shared with us and some of the fun facts or some of the things that you've experienced or people you've worked with up to this point. Now, I'm just curious, if you go to a convention, a Comic-Con, if you will, is there anyone you're particularly looking forward to meeting somewhere down the line, or maybe somebody you would want to work with in the future?
Well, it was Stan Lee before, and unfortunately Stan's gone.
He is no longer with us.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I would think right now I'm really interested, and I know very little about it, in anime. I would like to actually meet. I find that to be a fascinating culture.
Mm-hmm.
Sailor Moon in particular. Sailor Moon has this thing about cosplay with all this costume stuff.
Yes.
And it's totally multiracial. Racial.
Mhm.
I mean, really, there you see Afro Americans, Asians, and Hispanics all constantly doing this, where you don't in everything else. Most of the world, without getting heavily into the aspects of it, is geared towards middle class white America, and that's what you see when they show examples of it. This and also most, when you grew up, there were kids who that you weren't into what they were in, and so. This seems to be that everybody is into this one thing, and I'm exactly wondering what brings that bond together. So that kind of fascinates me in a way.
I'm actually in the process of reading manga.
Really?
Yeah, I just started reading it. A few friends of mine over the years have said, Ryan, you should try reading manga, try watching anime. It's unique, it's different, it's got a really good flair of its own. And I really gave it much thought. I told a friend of mine years ago, I said to her, I don't really have any intention of reading manga or watching anime. It just doesn't seem like it would be my thing. But then I went to my local comic shop, # always support your local comic shop, and I bought some, what do you call these? The paperbacks of manga that included series such as Dragon Ball Z, Full Metal
I watched that for a while.
Yeah. I also got Full Metal Alchemist. I also got a few few volumes, if you will, of Rurouni Kenshin, and one volume of Gundam. Now, granted, there's a million iterations of Gundam, but the Gundam I have is called Gundam 000 Mobile Suit, and this is volume 1 that I got at my local comic shop. Just to be clear, I've read Dragon Ball Z. I really like it so far. I've read Full Metal Alchemist. I like it so far. Maybe not quite as much as Dragon Ball Z, but then again, I'm still early in my journey of diving into the manga circuit, so I can't really say too much. But so far, I know it's early in the game, but I'm really liking what I'm reading here.
You almost have to do research before you start to read it.
Well, I went on Facebook. And I said to my friends, I said, listen, if I want to dive into something known as manga or anime, where are some good places to start? And then I got comments and comments and comments, and I took them to heart, and I said, okay, I see where you're going with this. All right, well, I'll start over here, because some of them described like what certain series are like, well, it's a story about this, or if you like stories about action, or if you like stories about revenge, this is a good series to look at, or this is a good series to look over. And I thought, okay. So I just took those suggestions, kind of put them in my mind, or, brought them up on my phone, because I can't remember everything. Yeah. And I go to my local comic shop, and I'm looking at all these different titles. I'm like, they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't have this. Oh, my local comic shop has this. Okay, I gotcha. So I just bought the paperbacks, and they're sitting over here on my bookshelf, and I'm in the process of reading them. And I gotta say, I am very fascinated and intrigued by what I've read so far. It's good.
It kind of intrigues me that it's out there and it's so large.
It's massive.
Yeah, I went to an anime convention once out in Orange County. Yeah, and it was amazing. This was sort of at the beginning of Comic-Cons too.
Sure.
When I first went to a Comic-Con, it was in maybe 2003. Or this might have been 2001. And what is amazing, and the pandemic literally stopped that. That's kind of what really shut us down. We wanted to be able to move merchandise at a Comic-Con where we had our target audience without trying to search for where to find it.
Of course.
And they stopped completely. I mean, for instance, we did the Cosmic Crusaders series with Stan Lee's great characters. And through Andy's help with Stan Lee Universe, which they own now, we got into their social media. They have 19 million followers. Jeez. My theory was if you can drop into that, you can be very successful. Well, they are. And if they run a picture of Stan, they get 670,000 likes on it in a day. But if you charge them 50 cents for each like, you'd make about $1,400. They aren't buyers. So you have to go where the Comic-Con and that element, they're buyers. But you're not appealing to it. And like I said, if you're not there in front of them, you just don't get seen.
That's a fair point.
But then again, if you talked more about it on your show and got your minions, to support it, they'd go out there and buy it. The world would be a better place, Ryan.
You never know. Stranger things have happened around here. I will grant you that one. But yes, no, and I'm looking forward to going back to conventions, and seeing my friends again, seeing fellow vendors that I'm friends with, and supporting their businesses and all that kind of jazz. I'm in the process of putting together plans to go to a convention up in the city of brotherly love of Philadelphia, Fan Expo Philly to be more precise, because the cast of my favorite show Smallville is going to be in the house, and I want to see them. So. Because that goes back to my love for Superman, and I love Smallville. It's my favorite show. So that's.
I know. Excuse me. I never watched that show. I'm sitting here thinking about it as you said it.
It's good. It's good stuff. It's all about Clark Kent living up in Smallville with his friends and how he deals with his powers and how certain powers come. It's a different take on the Superman mythos. All 10 seasons, I believe, are available for streaming on Hulu. It's 218 episodes across 10 seasons. It's
kind of amazing how, you say there's different aspects that people look into about his power. Everything, all these shows have different avenues and areas that they can go down and expand to, but the public mainly sees it for the show and has to really be, I guess, an ardent fan to get into the end of it, like you say, and see the other avenues it presents. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, I would, in my opinion, I would venture to say so. And once again, we're talking with the incredible Joe Mariam here on And I Quote. Make sure you're sharing this video with all 800 of your closest friends. You're going to like the way they look after watching this video, I guarantee it. If you have any questions for them, let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comments. But I want to let you know that this episode, indeed, of And I Quote is powered by Pod Decks. Now, Pod Decks are unique interview questions and episode starting prompts within the palm of your own hand. So whether you are a new podcaster or existing broadcaster looking to grow your audience or to get more engagement, you're going to want to check out poddex.com and make sure you use the promo code NerdCulture to get 10% off your first order. You're not going to want to miss that, I guarantee it. So the first question we have here for you from our good friends at Poddex here, Joe, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
If I could change one thing about myself,
what would it be? Anything at all?
Well, I wouldn't change my looks because I really don't care. I've always been really fond of my voice. I wouldn't change that. I would maybe say where I live. I'm mired here in Los Angeles, Hollywood, California, and I always say that if there were any place I could think of that I could do this and work out, I'd go there. And I just think. Then again, I also say that my needs are small. All I need is a place that has a tropical climate, a decent golf course that serves dark rum. But, I would probably change where I live, which would obviously change what I do, I guess.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
I would think.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. You know why it's interesting is I've never thought about it.
That's what these questions are made for, to keep you on your toes and keep you thinking. So, with that being said, what is your most treasured possession?
My most treasured possession, I like to say my mind. It's very weird that you asked me that because I don't really have a thing for possession. I had a house burned down. And all of a sudden, one morning, my high school letterman's jacket, everything, weirdest stuff like that, pictures were gone. And because of that, I've never really formed a serious attachment to anything, but I might say my music collection because I'd be lost without it. It rules a bunch of my life, but I'd never given that a thought. But like I said, I really did lose it for material possessions because it was suddenly gone. I mean, the question is, if your house burned down, what is the one thing you would miss the most
Right.
that you lost? And the answer, beyond anything else, is pictures. Because I can't go back to my godson and say, I want you to be 6 months old again. I need to take this picture, you know? So, I mean, and people don't realize this, and nobody ever prepares for the inevitable, the worst, and they lose things. But, that's how when somebody says, what is your most prized possession? Somebody said to me at Thanksgiving, what are you most thankful for? I said, I think it was opening my eyes this morning. I'm not sure. But I mean,
hey, you're still here. Your eyes can still open. You're still breathing. So there you go.
Still
That's
doing it. That's
happy
what
about.
I say. But the most prized possession, I'd have to really think about that. I don't think I value anything as that actual prize. That's kind of interesting.
That's okay. That's okay. Real quick before I chime in on the next question, Philip says, Ryan, we are not that old. I still have hair, Philip, don't worry. I know when I said that I've been on this earth for a long time, I know we're still, to me, you and me, Philip, and a few others out there, we're still young bucks. It's okay. Philip says, Ed Steiner loves Then Come Bronson, I believe.
Then Came Bronson, yeah.
Or Then Came Bronson, excuse me.
Stupid little show. Michael Parks was on a Harley Sportster. And it starts off with him looking over LA that's covered with smog, and a guy in a car next to him wearing a hat, looks like he's just got a suit, and he goes, "Where you going, buddy?" And Parks says, "I don't know, wherever the road leads me." And he goes, "God, I wish I was you." And it just starts like that, and he just goes places, and he's just do-gooder who just does all this nonsensical stuff, but you watched it every week to see what he was going to do. I mean, that's what television was about then.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So, what is something that you like that most people do not?
What is something that I like that most people
don't?
That's an interesting question too, because you don't pay much attention to what most people don't like. What do I like? Actually, amongst all my other things, I like classical music, and most people don't. But
Beethoven, Mozart. Yeah, I like that stuff too.
I played the violin as a kid.
Violin? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's weird. I have a complete wild taste in music that goes to every angle, but I have this thing for classical music. I don't know why. I don't listen to it all that much anymore, but basically string. It just has, maybe it's soothing. I'm not sure. And I would say most people don't like that. What else do I like?
That's okay. Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, it's the truth. I mean,
some people like classical music, some people don't. I mean, my brother was the one who introduced me to classical music growing up, and I ended up liking Beethoven, Mozart, and a few other ones. So anytime I got a chance, if I need something to concentrate, music from Mozart or Beethoven will help me concentrate if I'm doing work.
That's interesting. That's good. That's good. Music does that for me in a big way.
Yeah, especially if it's Beethoven's Für Elise. Big Für Elise fan.
Yeah.
Or Moonlight Sonata.
I have
That's another one.
I do like things like that. Of course, then again, I also like very early 30s jazz that most people don't like.
Ooh, I love jazz. Specific smooth jazz. I like, granted, I didn't start listening to jazz until our local radio station here in town. It was called 104.3 Baltimore Smooth Jazz Radio Station. Yeah. And when they played music from a saxophonist by the name of Mindy Abair.
Very good.
Incredible stuff. And I became a jazz fan because of Mindy Abair's music. And then I started buying her CDs when CDs were still a thing. And then I started downloading them to my iPod and whatnot. I still got some of her stuff on my iPod Touch over here on the desk.
Maybe the most incredible instrument, the saxophone, as far as sound quality. I mean, I like all types, but I've always had a thing about saxophone.
He's got a point.
Yeah, I mean,
Lisa Simpson can play it very well on The Simpsons. So they're,
shows you that anybody can.
It's one of those things. Yeah, even The Simpsons know good music when they see it, with Lisa Simpson playing the saxophone every chance she gets.
Strangely enough, one of the first albums I ever bought. People always say, "What's the first?" Because they know I'm a total rocker and have all this rock and roll music. First album I ever bought was "Rough and Tumble" by Stanley Turrentine.
Wow.
Stanley Turrentine is a jazz saxophonist, and I can't even remember why.
Wow, my goodness, I was not aware of that. Man, fun facts on this program known as And I Quote. What would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I'd say it goes down to the lines of if you're true to yourself, you'll do what you want. If basically that I'm a believer. I tell people all the time that even if you have to sacrifice everything for it, if that's what you think you ought to do, go do it, because you're not going to get a second chance. And that's the kind of advice I think I learned early from losing people, that I have lived my life to the point where I never want to look back and say I wish I had done that. So it would be along those lines, I guess.
Makes a whole lot of sense, and we thank you for sharing that with us. We want to take this opportunity to thank Joe Mariam for being our guest on this week's episode of And I Quote. Joe, where can the person watching or listening to this episode find you online and all the projects that you have coming up? What do you got?
Well, Andy Heyward Animation Art, all one word, AndyHeywardAnimationArt.com is our website that we do have the Cosmic Crusaders and Inspector Gadget and Captain Planet on. As I said, I'm toying with the idea now because of the problems we ran into the changing the name. I would go back to Life Inside the Cell. I can always be reached at either jmariam45@AOL.com or at LITC, Life Inside the Cell Productions at AOL.com. And the thing about it is I do answer. One thing I found about when you sell things via eBay or online and all, that you spend a lot of time, if you're really doing it right, you spend a lot of time listening to people, like Philip. I met Philip through that, and I have a lot of stories about people like that. And people always say, did you talk to them? I said, yeah, she's a middle-aged housewife, teaches school. You just come into all this, so I'm always available.
That is truly amazing. Thank you so much. A link to where you can find the Andy Heyward animation, art, all that stuff is located within the description of this video. So make sure you check it out, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Once again, my name is Ryan of Nerd Culture. You can follow us on all forms of social media simply at It's Nerd Culture. New videos going up on our channel each and every week. If you want an audio only version of this episode, you can find the link to that within the description of this video down below. So make sure you check that out as well. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe, and always enjoy the things that you love most, whether it's Saturday morning cartoons, animation cells. Support all these wonderful people who put these projects together for you. Also, real quick, a promo I'm going to play for you right here, just to give you a little bit of context. This project that I'm about to show you is actually up right now on Indiegogo.com. You want to own a piece of history? You're going to want to own this. Type in the words Jack Kirby, and you will see the project there, written by Glenn B. Fleming. It is a book and a documentary DVD that goes along with it. You're going to want to check that out, because Jack Kirby, when it comes to comic books, he's on the Mount Rushmore. He's one of the creams of the crop that rises to the top. Yeah. So enjoy that. Check it out. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe, and life is better when reading. Take a look.
The original intention of the film was just for my personal use, but I thought, with it being such a unique thing, that I'd like to offer it to anybody who wants to see it. On the first visit, Jack took us into his another room, separate room, and there were these brown parcels full of artwork piled up, and he said to me, "You draw like I do." We were in the studio for 5 hours, it was fantastic. And there's this, he's got this desk, and everything he's ever drawn has come from this desk. And then I would just go with the flow, and that's what this film is about. It's just a unique film of him.
He says, "I beat you." He says, "They say we came in under the dead heat." He says, "That's not true, because I beat you." And the American said, "Well," he says, "if you like to think so," he says, "but I know the real story." He says, I know I clearly won that one." Well, Joe is 6'3", and I was a run, from the Lower East Side. And being Joe's partner was an advantage to me, because Joe was believable, you know. They would talk to Joe, and the Goodman brothers would get to know him. Martin Goodman owned Marvel at that time. He went to his mother and he says, look, Jackie got a job drawing. He says, they're paying him for it. They're paying him money for drawing. He says, suppose I go with Jackie. He says, and he says, they'll pay me money. He says, I'll draw and they'll pay me money. He said, I'll give the money to you, which we did. We gave it all to our mothers. They called me from NASA. You know, I lived in Long Island. And they say, would you like to come down and draw these guys in training? I swear, this is not a story. And I said, yes, of course, I'd love to come down. And